This is a really interesting story because West Ham United are interested in signing N'Golo Kante. He's currently with the Saudi Arabian club, of course, Al Ittihad. Initial soundings have indicated a deal could cost in the region of £20 million. But we do know that when players go from the Premier League or anywhere else in Europe to Saudi Arabia, one thing that usually hikes up is their wages. And that is one issue that could prove to be a stumbling block if West Ham United can progress with that deal. As far as West Ham United are concerned, they've explored, as I said, the conditions of a potential deal, and now they're having discussions internally about whether to actually formally bid, to go back to Al Ittihad and say, this is how much money we'd like to pay to try and bring N'Golo Kante to the London Stadium. Look, throughout this transfer window, we've been talking about various targets that West Ham United have had, and they've brought in players already as well, including Max Kilman from Wolves. And the midfield area didn't seem like a top priority. But when you're talking about N'Golo Kante, I think you take that out of the equation because someone like N'Golo Kante would almost represent a unique market opportunity for any club to be able to bring a player of his stature to their club, even though he's 33 years old. You mentioned it there, back in the French squad for the Euros. Performed really well for France as well in the Euros. Started every single one of their 6 games at Euro 2024 as well. He only joined Al Ittihad last summer. He signed a 3-year contract, so he's still got 2 years left on that contract. So at the moment, it is at the interest stage. It would still need a lot of work for a potential deal to be able to go through.
OK, but I think one that would certainly excite West Ham fans, just to be linked to Kante returning to the Premier League. What about any other West Ham arrivals? Because maybe their fans expecting quite a busy summer, I think.
Yeah, and I think they will have a busy summer, and I think they're showing their ambition as well. We've just talked about N'Golo Kante,
yeah.
And that in itself is a sign of how ambitious West Ham United want to be in this transfer window. Another example of that came last week. I mean, 2 weeks previously, this player, Jean-Claire Todibo, West Ham United went in with a €30 million bid. It got rejected by Nice. And we thought that was the end of it because Juventus were really strongly linked with Todibo, and it was all the noises were pointing towards eventually he would go to Juventus. Then West Ham United stuck in there, went back in earlier on this week and struck a deal with Nice. And it was an initial loan with a €32 million option fee. However, on the downside for West Ham United with regard to this deal, while the club-to-club has been agreed, there's no agreement between the club and the player because it seems his preference is to go to Juventus. However, Juventus haven't got a club-to-club agreement, and it seems they might have to do a few sales first before they can match what West Ham United have put on the table for Nice. And it's one of those situations where it's in Nice's interest to maybe have this agreement with West Ham United out there because it tells other clubs, namely Juventus, this is what it is going to take for you to buy somebody like Jean-Claire Todibo. So we're saying €32 million is the option fee. The actual total package would probably be mid-30 million to late 30 million, simply because the initial loan would carry with itself a loan fee as well. So definitely one to watch because the centre-half position is one that they've looked to strengthen throughout this transfer window. We thought it was only going to be one in Max Kilman, but there are doubts over the futures of Naif Aguerd and or Kurt Zouma. Now, if one of those were to leave, then you'd expect West Ham United to go back into the market. But because they've already agreed a deal with Nice for a central defender, you maybe think, is there something going on in the background with one of those 2 other players that maybe they can sort out a deal whereby one of those will leave, whereby they could bring in someone like Todibo or someone else. But at the moment, I think West Ham United have just got to play the waiting game. They've done all they can club to club. They've got to wait to see if Juventus can sort something out with Nice and then the player. And if that happens, West Ham probably won't be able to do anything about it, given the preference of the player is probably to go to Juventus. There are other areas that they want to strengthen as well. West Ham, right back, looks like a big priority position. We do know that they were in talks with Southampton over Kyle Walker-Peters. That one's kind of cooled down a little bit of late, but there is still open dialogue between the clubs. but there was a gap in valuation between what West Ham were prepared to pay and what Southampton wanted. There is strong interest in Aaron Wan-Bissaka from Manchester United. And again, West Ham United are deciding whether they're going to turn that interest into a more formal bid towards Manchester United. We think United's valuation for a player they bought for around £50 million is around £15 million plus. Now, the interesting thing with both of these players is that they have entered the final year of their contracts. So it wouldn't surprise me if West Ham United just bided their time a little bit. Because if neither of these players are going to sign a new contract with Southampton, as far as Walker-Peters is concerned, and United, as far as Aaron Wan-Bissaka is concerned, then the later you go in the window, then maybe the better deal you could get, because the threat remains that the players could see out the rest of their contract and those clubs could lose those players for free. The other position is striker. We know that there's an interest in John Duran from Aston Villa. There's tentative interest in the Villarreal striker, Alexander Sørloth. You might remember him, he played for Crystal Palace. Didn't work out for him in the Premier League, but since he's left the Premier League, he's kind of revitalised his career and he's become a wanted man with a number of clubs. And Reiss Nelson is another name that has been bandied around as well. The Arsenal winger, he wants to assess all of his options because he wants more game time. So plenty going on at West Ham United, and examples of how they're trying to show their ambition in this window.
Yeah, talking about ambition in this window, we've spoken a lot about Manchester United, obviously the first window under Ineos part ownership. But what do you think's next for them after securing Leny Yoro?
Well, not just Leny Yoro, Joshua Zirkzee as well. So 2 signings in the space of a week, which they've been chasing for a few weeks during this transfer window, and 2 signings where it looked like both players were going to go elsewhere. It looked very likely that Zirkzee was going to go to AC Milan, and it looked very, very likely that Leny Yoro wanted Real Madrid. But Manchester United pursued both of those deals and managed to sell the project to both of these players. And now we have both of them raising that Manchester United shirt, and they are Manchester United players. So 2 of the priority positions have been filled there. A central defender, which they were looking for throughout the window, a forward player as well. Midfield looks like another area that they want to strengthen. And the Paris Saint-Germain midfielder, Manuel Ugarte, remains a strong option for Manchester United. I'm told that dialogue is still open between United and Paris Saint-Germain over a potential deal. United have explored the conditions of that deal, and it's understood Ugarte himself is keen on the move. And we think Paris Saint-Germain will probably want to do a move as well, because he didn't really figure as much as he probably would have liked last season, and they will probably think it's an area where they can make a bit of money. Personal terms are not expected to be a problem, but he's not the only player that Manchester United are looking at. They're looking, as is in keeping with how they're trying to do this transfer window, at a number of targets. And Adrien Rabiot, who has been linked with United in the past. They tried to sign him 2 seasons ago. They tried to get him as a free agent last season as well, before he signed a 1-year deal at Juventus. It looked like he might be staying on at Juventus this summer as well, but both club and player have announced that that's not going to happen. So he is now a free agent. So it is one that Manchester United will look at. They'll keep an eye on his situation. And another player who they did have last season is Sofian Amrabat. Now, if you go back to last summer, when they signed him on deadline day, they signed him on an initial loan with the option to buy him for 20 million euros. That is still on the table, that option. Manchester United are still deciding whether to exercise that option for Sofian Amrabat. So that can't be ruled out. Now, if you told a lot of United fans 2 months before the end of the season whether any option was going to be exercised, they probably would have said no. But towards the end of the season, he was playing quite a lot, and he was figuring in Erik ten Hag's first team. He started the FA Cup final against Manchester City when Erik ten Hag decided to play a different formation. And a lot of United fans were then saying, oh, this is a Sofian Amrabat that we saw at the World Cup for Morocco. This is a Sofian Amrabat that we were expecting to see. So suddenly, has Amrabat kind of given them food for thought to maybe think, actually, he could be a good signing for Manchester United? However, I'm talking about potential incomings. They could all be dependent on outgoings. and whether Manchester United can get money for players and create squad space within that squad as well. Casemiro and Scott McTominay are players that have attracted interest. Saudi interest in Casemiro has cooled of late, but it hasn't been ruled out. Fulham and Galatasaray both interested in Scott McTominay. But in keeping with their targeted and focused approach in transfers, United seem to have positioned themselves really well and really proactively that if there are to be departures in the midfield area, then they could be ready to press play on one or two other targets.